We don't know what its builders called it. We don't know what language they spoke. We don't even know what they called themselves. The name we use today, Mohenjo-daro, isn't ancient at all. It's a modern name that translates, eerily, to something like the Mound of the Dead. And when you first see it, that name feels wrong, because this is not a crude pile of rubble. Rising out of the dusty plains of the Indus River Valley are the remains of a city, and not just any city. A vast, planned metropolis, laid out on a precise grid of streets that may have housed tens of thousands of people more than 4,000 years ago. It was one of the largest cities on Earth in its time, the centerpiece of a civilization that stretched across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. And yet, almost no one has heard of it. We have no kings' names, no epic stories, no list of its gods. We found one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, and it came to us completely silent. To understand why that silence is so haunting, and why we eventually stopped digging into it, you have to first understand just how astonishingly advanced this primitive city actually was. Walk the excavated streets of Mohenjo-daro and the first thing that hits you is the order. This was not a city that grew up in a tangle of alleys. It was planned, deliberately, from the top down. The streets run in a grid, crossing at right angles, oriented to the points of the compass, dividing the city into neat blocks. The buildings were made of standardized, kill-fired bricks, produced in consistent sizes across the entire civilization, as if to a shared building code stretching across hundreds of miles. But the detail that stuns engineers the most is the water. Mohenjo-daro had one of the most sophisticated sanitation systems of the ancient world. Many homes had their own wells and their own private bathrooms. Wastewater ran out of the houses into covered drains that lined the streets, an enclosed sewage network, complete with what looked like inspection holes for maintenance. We are talking about indoor plumbing and municipal drainage 4,000 years ago, a level of public sanitation that much of the world would not see again until modern times. Consider that for a moment. While other early civilizations were still throwing their waste into the streets, the people of the Indus were channeling it away through engineered, covered sewers. They used standardized weights and measures so precise that a small stone weight found in one city matches the system used hundreds of miles away in another. This was a civilization obsessed with order, cleanliness, and consistency on a scale that feels almost modern, almost bureaucratic, and utterly unlike the God-King empires rising elsewhere in the very same era. At the city's heart sat a structure we call the Great Bath, a large, watertight, sunken pool, sealed with fine brick and a layer of tar to hold water, with steps leading down into it. No one knows exactly what it was for, ritual purification, perhaps, but it stands as one of the earliest public water structures ever built. Nearby sat a massive structure often called the granary, a raised platform with ventilation channels, hinting at the organized storage and redistribution of food on a civic scale. The city was divided into a raised, fortified upper section, a kind of citadel holding these great public works, and a sprawling lower town where ordinary people lived and worked. That deliberate separation of public and private, of monument and home, is the fingerprint of careful planning, of someone deciding in advance how a city of thousands should be laid out and run. This was a society of planners, engineers, and administrators. And here is what makes that so strange. For a civilization this organized, this advanced, this widespread, we have found almost nothing that tells us who was in charge. This is the heart of the mystery, and it is genuinely unsettling. Think about every other great early civilization. Egypt left us pharaohs, towering monuments to god-kings, walls covered in writing and art glorifying their rulers. Mesopotamia left us law codes, the names of kings, epic poems. They shouted their power across the centuries. The Indus civilization did the opposite. We have found no grand palaces that clearly belong to a king. No giant temples to a dominant god. No royal tombs stuffed with treasure. No monuments built to glorify a ruler. For a society capable of organizing standardized cities across a vast territory, the near-total absence of obvious kings and god-emperors is bizarre, and some researchers wonder if it points to a society organized in a way we don't fully recognize, perhaps far more uniform, or run by merchants and councils rather than warlords. But the deepest silence of all is the writing. The Indus people did have a script. We have found it, short inscriptions, mostly on small carved seals, beautiful little stamps showing animals like the humped bull and a mysterious unicorn-like creature. These seals are tiny masterpieces, carved with astonishing skill and likely used to stamp goods and mark ownership across a trade network that reached as far as Mesopotamia. They turn up everywhere across the civilization, and some have even been found far away in the markets of Mesopotamia, proof that these people traded across seas and deserts, carrying their goods and their unreadable script to distant lands. Writing was woven into the everyday fabric of their world, from the grandest warehouse to the smallest household. And that only deepens the frustration. These were not an illiterate people. They wrote constantly. We simply cannot hear them. There are hundreds of these symbols. And in a century of trying, no one has ever been able to read them. The Indus script remains undeciphered. We are staring directly at the words of these people, holding their writing in our hands, and we cannot understand a single sentence. We don't even know for certain what kind of language it records. So we have a brilliant, planned, peaceful-seeming civilization that built one of the ancient world's great cities, and then left us no story we can read. And just when we might have dug deeper for answers, the ground itself, and our own caution, forced us to stop. When archaeologists first uncovered Mohenjo-daro in the 1920s, they dug with the enthusiasm of their era, peeling back the layers of the city. But over the following decades, a slow disaster revealed itself, and it changed everything about how the site is treated. The problem is salt and water. The land around Mohenjo-daro has a high water table, and as groundwater rises and evaporates, it draws salts up through the ancient bricks. Those salts crystallize inside the brickwork, and as they grow, they crack and crumble the very fabric of the city from within. The act of exposing the ruins to the open air accelerated the decay. In other words, the more of the city we uncovered, the faster the uncovered parts began to destroy themselves. Restorers have tried to fight it, covering walls, managing the water, but it is a slow, losing battle against chemistry and climate. Visitors can still walk those ancient streets today, yet conservators watch nervously as bricks that survived 4,000 years buried in the earth quietly erode now that they breathe open air. Every season of exposure costs the city something it can never get back. And there's a second, deeper barrier. The oldest, earliest layers of Mohenjo-daro, the original city, the foundations of how it all began, lie below the modern water table. They are, quite literally, underwater. To dig down to the very beginning of the city, you would have to fight a constant flood, and in doing so you might damage or destroy everything above. Faced with this, archaeologists made a hard, deliberate decision: stop. Hold the deep excavation. Do not chase the secrets in the lower layers, because reaching them could doom the city we can still see. Most of Mohenjo-daro, by some estimates, the majority of it, remains unexcavated to this day, sealed in the earth on purpose, and the deepest, most revealing layers may be permanently out of reach beneath the water. We shut down the dig not because we ran out of questions, but because finding the answers might cost us the city itself. And there is one more mystery sitting at the end of this story, one we may now never solve because the dig was stopped, how it ended. At some point, the great Indus cities declined and were abandoned. Mohenjo-daro, this masterpiece of planning, was gradually emptied of its people, left to the dust, and forgotten so completely that even its name was lost. Why? For a long time, dramatic theories filled the silence: invasion, a violent conquest, even, in the wildest tellings, some catastrophic blast. But the harder evidence points to something quieter and, in a way, more sobering. The leading explanations are environmental. The mighty rivers that the civilization depended on may have shifted course or dried up as the climate changed, slowly pulling the lifeblood out of the cities. Without reliable water and farmland, a great urban society cannot hold together. Layered on top of that, the cities show signs of strain in their final phases, sloppier building, crowding, a fraying of the careful order that had defined them for centuries. It is the portrait not of a sudden death, but of a long, slow unraveling, a sophisticated world gradually losing the very conditions that had allowed it to exist in the first place. The people didn't necessarily die in a single dramatic event, they may simply have drifted away, village by village, family by family, in search of water and survival, until the grand grid of streets stood empty under the sky. A civilization that built one of the most advanced cities on Earth was undone, most likely, not by an army, but by a river that changed its mind. And the final proof of exactly what happened may be sealed in those flooded lower layers we chose never to reach. So step back and look at what Mohenjo-daro really is. It is a city we found, admired, and then deliberately stopped excavating, a dig shut down before it was finished, not by war or politics, but by the painful understanding that to dig deeper is to destroy. We are in the strange position of standing over the answers to some of history's biggest questions: who these people were, how they governed themselves, what their writing says, why they vanished, and choosing to leave those answers in the ground, because pulling them out would turn them to dust. It is the same hard wisdom we apply to other great sites. Sometimes the most respectful thing we can do with the past is to not disturb it. Mohenjo-daro is a humbling reminder that being able to find something is not the same as being ready to understand it. We have the technology to expose the rest of the city. We do not have the technology to do it without killing it. And so a great civilization keeps its secrets, lying in silence beneath the Indus plains, its writing unread, its rulers unknown, its end half explained, waiting, like so much of the buried past, for a future wise enough and gentle enough to finally listen without breaking what it hears. So I'll leave you with this: if reading the last words of a lost people meant risking the loss of everything they left behind, would you turn the page, or leave the book closed? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.